Okay, welcome. So this is Bibliography 615. It's a joint section for linguistics and TESOL graduate students. And in this short lecture, I'm going to talk a little bit about what linguistics is, about basic and applied linguistics, about research, and about our department here at WVU, just to try to familiarize you with some of these uh, things. Right? So first off, this is from the syllabus, and I discussed this briefly in the other video. So here's some goals that I put in the syllabus to sort of introduce you to how research works and what kinds of tools and skills that you need to read research and to consume research. Also to try to teach you some basic methodologies for producing research if you decide to go that route. And then to help you learn methods for framing and summarizing and disseminating research, and for framing and summarizing and presenting yourself as well. So those are sort of the broad goals in here. But as I said earlier, this is something else I put in the syllabus, which is that I want this to be relevant to you and to be helpful to your individual interests and aspirations. And so really, if there's something that you feel would be important for you to get out of this class that you're not getting, please do let me know. I really am serious about this. I can change things, incorporate different topics or different areas according to people's wants and needs, but only if you let me know what you're looking for out of the class. And here's something that isn't in the syllabus, but it's also relevant. So part of the purpose of this class is to orient you to our degree program here, our master's programs, our department, and the field that you've just entered. And so that aspect of a class is sometimes called a professionalization seminar or pro seminar. And so I definitely want to incorporate those aspects of a pro seminar into this class as well. So amongst other things, you can think of the class as a kind of Ask Me Anything session about linguistics, about WVU, about our department, about universities in general, science, life, and the universe, right? So really, I'm here to basically answer questions and help you familiarize yourselves with your new professional and academic context. So that's what I'm here for. So talking a little bit about the topic of this class and of our department, really, I'm going to find it useful to make this split between what I'm calling basic linguistics and applied linguistics. So applied linguistics is a standard term that people use to describe themselves. Usually the thing that I'm calling basic linguistics is just referred to as linguistics, but that's sort of confusing and it obscures the difference between these two different areas, both of which are represented in this class and in this department. And it's going to be useful to keep them separate so we can talk about differences between them. So here's my excuse me, gloss on what this division is about. So in basic linguistics, we're asking about the fundamental nature of different kinds of things associated with language, right? So what's the nature of linguistic structure, right? What are languages like in terms of structure, and what are they not like in terms of structure? What's the nature of linguistic communication? Right? What's the nature of the cognition or the mental machinery that we go through to learn and use and know a language? Right? Some basic linguists ask questions about what the history of languages are like. How did this language come to be this way instead of being some other way? We don't have a big focus on that one in our department, but that's definitely part of linguistics. What is the nature of the interaction between linguistic and cultural information? That's broadly speaking what sociolinguistics is about, and there's definitely some expertise in sociolinguistics in our department. And what's the nature of linguistic learning? We're usually in basic linguistics, we're asking about linguistic learning by infants and young children who are acquiring a native language. So that's normally what the questions in basic linguistics are about. And there's more, but this is just meant as an example of what basic linguistics is about. It's really the basic science of language. What are languages like? How do humans acquire them and use them and know them? How did language get to be this way instead of some other way? And so on and so forth. Now, applied linguistics, as the name suggests, is about taking that basic knowledge and using it to ask questions about how to apply that knowledge in a pursuit of linguistic goals, right? How do we use our knowledge of basic linguistics to achieve real-world goals? Now, in principle, that could include any kind of goal. So applied linguistics includes things like studying communication, how do you use linguistics for business success? How do you use linguistics for fiction writing or whatever, right? It could be anything that you use language for. That said, in practice, most of the work in applied linguistics is about language teaching and about adult language learning, or at least non-infant language learning of foreign languages or second languages or so on and so forth. And I think that's going to apply to TESOL as well. So under this understanding of applied linguistics, TESOL is part of applied linguistics, which is a broader area. So there's a real difference here between the kinds of questions that these two fields are interested in and how they pursue those questions, right? So I should disclose I am almost entirely on this side of linguistics, on the basic linguistics side, and I have limited knowledge of applied linguistics, and so in this class I'm making a real effort to incorporate examples and discussions from applied linguistics, but really I'm not an expert about this stuff. I'm an expert about this stuff. So you should know that about me as you're listening to me talk about different kinds of linguistic content. Now that said, I'll get there in a minute. First, why am I even going through this? Why am I telling you this? Maybe it's obvious. Well, it ends up being pretty important, especially in a setting like our department where you have both kinds of work going on. And that's because basic and applied sciences really have very different goals and very different kinds of data and data gathering procedures that they might use. So just looking to unambiguous cases where sort of everybody understands the difference between basic and applied sciences, let's look at what some of these differences might look like. So first I've done biochemistry, and on the left here are some tools and some things you might do in basic biochemistry. You might use a real-time PCR machine to take some chemical elements and spin them apart and then examine them with light in a way that allows you to determine their chemical composition, and you try to figure out what's in these substances or these chemicals that are inside my PCR machine. What are they made out of? In applied biochemistry, you're unlikely to be doing this. Instead, you might be trying to engineer different kinds of biological material to figure out, in this particular example, how to get useful genetic material into a human with a tumor. Right? So this would be applied biochemistry, taking the stuff that we learned about the chemical makeup of different kinds of elements and trying to use it to address a goal, in this case, working on a cure for cancer. Right? So very, very different goals here. This one is trying to find out what's what. This one's trying to accomplish something to help people. Right? Different instruments here, different methods of analysis, different kinds of experiments, and so on and so forth. Here's some physics. Basic physics might be asking questions about the nature of electromagnetic fields. And this diagram, I don't even exactly know what this is representing, but it has something to do with the electromagnetic field produced by different objects in the universe. What is the fundamental nature of physical stuff in the universe? That's basic physics. In applied physics, you might be taking this knowledge that you've gained about electromagnetic fields and using it to make computer microprocessors. That's what this illustration is of. You can see the COVID-like security or PPE kinds of requirements in a semiconductor laboratory where everything has to be extremely clean, right? And of course, these are related, right? The applied physics is going to use basic physics, but the people who do this are not going to be dressed up like the people who do this. They're not going to be using the same kinds of procedures and analyses and so on and so forth. There's going to be really different methodological things going on in these two branches of physics. So that's just a couple examples of the difference between basic and applied sciences. And more generally, basic and applied sciences often have very different goals and very different data gathering procedures. So that said, it's not hopeless, right? There's going to be some shared elements between basic and applied linguistics that they're also going to share with a lot of other empirical disciplines, right? So empirical disciplines are disciplines that are about how things work out there in the world. Right? And in general, the form of an argument, right, the form of a research question or a hypothesis is going to work broadly the same, whether you're doing basic or applied things. The general principles of experimental design, how do you set up an experiment, how do you interpret it, what does it mean, those are going to be the same in the two fields. Of course, the kinds of experiments that you use might be very different, but the general principles of how experiments work don't differ from one field to another. The kinds of data that we get in these two branches of linguistics are likely to be quite different. Not always, but often. They're going to be using different kinds of data. And we'll talk about that in a week or two. But that said, once you've got your data, the ways in which you analyze and interpret that data, according to sound theoretical principles, those are going to be the same in basic or applied sciences. Right? So there's a lot that we have in common across basic and applied linguistics, but it's also worth keeping in mind these differences because not everybody can be an expert in both the basic and the applied side of a field. Usually people specialize in one or the other. And that's how we come to our next excuse me, bit of information here. Our department has expertise in many areas of both basic and applied linguistics. Right? So our basic linguistics faculty mostly is just three. There is Sergio Robles Puente, who is a Spanish linguist, but he's more generally an expert in phonetics and phonology and sound systems, and especially how speakers use pitch or fundamental frequency and phrasing in order to structure their utterances or their speech. So he's a big expert in that. It's referred to as prosody. Also just general expert in Spanish linguistics and general linguistics. Sandra Stepanovic, who you've probably already met because she's the graduate director, she is a syntactician, so she specializes in how words and little bits of words come together to form more complex structures, such as phrases and sentences. And then there's me, I'm Jonah Katz, and I study phonetics and phonology, which is the nature of linguistic sounds and how linguistic sounds pattern within languages and between languages as well. Right? So those are our specialties, and we're the three sort of core basic linguistics people here. And then there's a number of faculty who have some expertise in either language pedagogy and specifically or applied linguistics more generally. And it's definitely worth talking to one or more of these people if this is the side that you're on. Of course, if you're in TESOL, you're already being exposed to some of these folks. But these would be the people to talk to for TESOL and applied linguistics related topics if you're looking for somebody who's really an expert. So Susan Brady, Cynthia Chalupa, more focused on pedagogy, Nicole Tracy Ventura, our department chair, Amy Thompson is an applied linguist, Qingxin Wu is an applied linguist, and Justin Morgan is also an applied linguist with a focus on Spanish classroom pedagogy. Now that I'm saying these people's names, this reminds me of something that I always try to include in this first class. What do you call your professors? And so this is confusing for some people when they first get here. The short answer is, how do you refer to your professor? Well, you follow the norms of the department and the culture that you're in. And so in our department, most graduate students refer to the professors as Dr. last name, right? So if you're talking to Susan Brady, you would call her Dr. Brady, Dr. Thompson, Dr. Stepanovic, and so on and so forth. Now, as for myself, I really don't care. You can call me whatever you want to, but you should be aware that some people really, really care a lot about this, and you're going to insult them if you don't call them Dr. last name. So you should probably get used to just doing that. Some people really don't care either way. Other people really do. So just to be safe, call everybody Dr. So-and-so. Well, if this were an interactive lecture, I would pause and say, ask me anything you want about our department. But usually people are too scared to speak up and ask questions anyway. Feel free to either send me an email or post a question on the website if you want to know anything about our department or about our faculty. So you're here now, you're doing your MA degree. What do most students do while they're here? Well, most students teach they satisfy their course requirements, and then they take comprehensive exams. These are a series of sort of lengthy exams you take at the spring of your second year. They are pretty stressful, although almost everybody ends up passing all of them. Uh, People do stress out about them. It's a little bit high stakes, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And then you're granted the master's degree on the basis of having completed your course requirements and passed those exams. Instead of the comprehensive exams, you can instead choose to write a research thesis. And that is a possibility in our department, but it takes some preparation. It's not always possible. And if you are thinking seriously about doing a research thesis instead of the exams, you're going to need to start thinking about how to set it up now. I mean, not this second, but this semester. You'll need to start thinking about that already. And that's actually one of the purposes of this class is in case people do decide to pursue a research thesis, hopefully some of the skills and the ideas that you'll gain in this class will be useful for you in getting started on that enterprise. So in general, you're going to need to figure out if this is the right choice for you. You'll need to pick a topic, and the most important part here is you're going to need to speak to professors in order to find an advisor. And then once that's done, that's actually sort of the hard part of getting started, is finding a specific topic and a specific question that you want to work on and getting a committee together. So in particular, you need to have somebody who's an expert be the chair of the committee, and you need to find 2 other professors who will be on the committee that will assess your thesis. And that's sort of the hardest part of this first stage of doing the thesis, because it can be a little bit tricky to find somebody who's confident enough and has enough free time to advise the thesis. And then after that, you'll go through several stages of proposal. I think the first document there is due in February of this year if you're planning on doing a thesis during your second year. So you'll need to have a pretty firm decision and a firm idea of what you want to do and a committee together by February if you want to pursue this possibility. We will talk more about writing a thesis and about how research works, obviously, in the course of this class. If in a few weeks, when you've sort of gotten started on looking at some research, you're thinking that this might be the choice for you, do schedule a meeting with me. Let's talk about it. I can help you figure out how to get started if you think this is something you want to pursue. That said, the majority of our students don't do a thesis. They take the comprehensive exams instead. Okay, so I'm going to talk about our first assignment, and I'll split this out into a different video, and I'll give you an illustrated example of how to locate some research and find a good paper to read for this week.